Welcome.
Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
It's our pleasure. Go ahead and proceed whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, sir. Chairman Newton, Representative Bamberg, Representative Fry, and Representative Wheeler, thank you so much for the chance to join with you this morning to share some feedback on H 3445. My name is Patrick Kelly. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for Palmetto State Teachers Association, which is the largest association for professional educators in South Carolina. I'm also a 16-year teaching veteran in our state, and I continue to teach one section of APUS government each morning at a Columbia area high school before heading to work at PSTA, which is where I'm actually joining you this morning from a high school classroom because I just wrapped up with my 28 seniors in APUS government. I come before you today to share the strong opposition of PSTA to the passage of H 3445. I shared some written feedback in advance of the hearing that outlines 3 core reasons for our opposition, but out of respect of your time, I don't intend to recap those points here, but I'd like to place those objections in a larger context. Right now, it is critically important that our schools have strong and consistent leadership. Now, you don't need to hear from me to know that South Carolina's education system has been turned upside down by the pandemic's creation of challenges in our schools and society that haven't been seen in a generation. And that's layered on top of existing problems that we already had in our schools, whether it's the teaching shortage crisis or inadequate social and mental health resources for our students. And as a result, a lot of ink has been spilt in this state in recent months talking about everything students have lost during this pandemic, with doomsday scenarios presented about how students will never catch up. Now, as a classroom teacher, I actually have a different perspective on things. Now, I will readily admit that things have been lost over the last 12 months. I teach seniors, and so they have lost moments, they have lost memories, they've lost milestones, and they've lost learning and instructional time. But I remain optimistic that our students will catch up. More significantly, I believe our students have gained some things over the past 12 months. Lessons I would never want them to learn as a result of a pandemic, but lessons I'm glad they've learned nonetheless, lessons like perseverance and self-direction and work ethic, things that are listed in our profile of the SC graduate. Children are resilient, and if we can see that in our history, nowhere more clearly than with the last generation to live through a generational global pandemic. And that's the generation of students that grew up to bring this country out of the Great Depression and to beat back fascism during World War II. So our children will come back strong. So I'm optimistic, but for that optimism to be realized, our state needs talented and steady leadership in our education system. And nowhere is that more true than in the office of the State Superintendent of Education. Over the past 12 months, some of our cabinet agencies, most notably DHEC, have struggled at points due to leadership vacancies in key positions. The Department of Education, however, has been steadied by the consistent and talented leadership of Superintendent Spearman, an official selected by the voters of South Carolina. However, if Amendment 1, the precursor to H 3545, had been ratified in 2018, there's a chance that our Department of Education could have faced this generational crisis with a leadership vacuum, a situation that would have amplified the negative effects of this pandemic on our students. Our schools have benefited from the leadership of a state superintendent with a lifetime of experience in education, including being a music teacher in our state. And the voters of our state are well equipped to ensure that we are choosing individuals for the office of state superintendent that have the requisite qualifications and background to thrive in that position. For some context, I worked from 2015 to 2017 for the U.S. Department of Education under 3 different U.S. Secretaries of Education, all appointed individuals. Of those 3 secretaries, only one of them had experience working in a school in the United States. Now, the other 2 had extensive professional backgrounds that intersected with education at points, but I can tell you conclusively that the secretary with school experience was the one that best served the students and teachers and families of this country. Our voters can make that choice. Now, in talking about our voters, I acknowledge that the system of election for our state superintendent doesn't guarantee adequate experience and expertise in the office holder. And we've unfortunately seen in recent decades some instances where somebody without the requisite experience was elected. However, that's a trade-off that we make in a democracy by trusting the will of the people with our most important choices. And in our state, few choices are more important than who will lead our state's education system that shapes the future of our children in our state. And the people have already spoken conclusively on this issue in 2018. As the chairman mentioned, in that year, Amendment 1 was on the ballot, and 60% of the voters rejected this same proposal by a margin of more than 330,000 votes. That was only 2 years ago that 60% of the voters of South Carolina rejected this proposal. We should trust the people of the state. And I would close by noting that our schools, in order to come back from this pandemic stronger, not only need strong leadership from our state superintendent, our success is tied to leadership from this General Assembly. And you have so much on your plate during this session. Critically important topics that touch the health and well-being of nearly every citizen of this state. And you are being asked on issue after issue to find solutions to problems where the needs seem greater than the resources. And that's true in education too. But of all the scarce resources that are needed to help our students, none of them is more valuable than time, including your time as a legislative body. Currently, there are multiple pieces of legislation filed in the House that can address critical needs in our schools, most notably the state's growing teacher shortage crisis. This year, our schools opened with 699 teaching vacancies. That's a 26% increase over last year. And we know that those vacancies have grown this school year due to mid-year resignations. There was a report in the Post and Courier in Myrtle Beach over the weekend about how Horry County schools have lost 2% of their teaching workforce during the school year. Now, that may not sound incredible in the private sector, but in the teaching workforce, that's incredible mid-year turnover because teachers that leave mid-year can actually have their license suspended. So most teachers don't leave mid-year unless it's a spouse being deployed or some other sort of family event. We're hemorrhaging teachers in this state. And we need policies that will better recruit and retain talent in our state because our students are suffering because of our inability to attract and retain teachers. The classroom that I'm teaching from right now is actually the classroom, that I'm speaking to you from, sorry, in the wrong place. But this classroom is the classroom of a teacher who's out today. And the reason it's empty is because our school doesn't have enough teachers and enough substitute teachers to cover absences. So the students that should be sitting in this room right now are sitting in the auditorium of my high school with other classes of students because we don't have enough adults in the building to meet the needs of our kids. That's what we need the General Assembly to hover in on with its time. That's the educational policies that will move the needle. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have great teachers, we don't have a great educational system. Research report after report shows that the number one in-school factor on the success of our students is the quality of the teacher in the classroom. So our students suffer when there is no teacher. And if our state can't recruit and retain talented teachers, it doesn't matter who has the top job in the Rutledge building, and H 3445 becomes moot. So for that reason, above all others, I ask your subcommittee not to issue a favorable report for H 3445 so that the valuable time of the General Assembly can be directed toward policies that will recruit and retain teachers so that whoever is leading in the State Department of Education has the teaching workforce in place necessary to get the outcomes for our students that we want. So members of the committee, thank you so much for your time and opportunity to testify in this unique environment. And I'd be happy to field any questions that you may have.